Hi and welcome to JJB Beads. My name is Jem and today I'm absolutely delighted to be working with a brand new bead mix. From the Goddess Collection, I'm going to be working with the goddess Hemera. Now this is a deity from ancient Greece and she was the personification of day. So why don't we have a look down on the board and take a glance through the beautiful collection of beads that we'll work with. JJB Beads Goddess Collection honours goddesses from around the globe and throughout time, and this for the goddess Hemera of ancient Greece, who is the personification of day. I cannot think of anything better than to be inspired by these glorious sunshine-fueled colours than to make a little sun pendant. So I hope that you enjoy the following little tutorial. It looks like it could be tricky, but once you get that basic technique down, I promise you it's more than achievable. In terms of tools today, we're going to use some chain nose pliers, flush cutters, round pliers or bail makers. We're also going to be using some additional flat pliers. Now I love mine because they're the same distance across all the way along. If you don't have a pair like that, you can use your standard tapered chain nose pliers and just pop a little permanent marker line across the point at which they are widest, so that we can get a really lovely sun pattern going on. Our wire today is 18 gauge round. I'm working with German style. It's better to use a medium to firm tempered wire for this project, but you can, if you desire, use a softer wire and then just work harden it a little bit later. I have around about 15 to 16 inches with me today, and I'm just going to start by warming the first part of that wire through. Just run that a couple of times between thumb and forefinger before we put a right angle bend about 2.5 inches from one end. I'm going to grab my bail making pliers now and we're going to start by creating a good bail. Now you can make this as decor for the home or you can make it as jewellery to be worn. I prefer to put my bail up at the top here at right angle so that it can be worn as a pendant, and you can still add that to wall decor if you wish. So I shall use step number 4 on my bail makers. Just rotate that wire around to create a wrapped loop up at the top, take the tail all the way over, and then you've got your round form. It's kind of useful sometimes to have a second pair of pliers, flat pliers, so that you can grip one side. Let's grip across that loop shape. And then we're going to use those bent chain nose pliers to help us create a nice firm coil around the upright section of the design. Now I tend to add, in a design like this, quite a few more coils around that central neckline area because it allows the bail to sit slightly higher and away from the rays of the sun. So you can choose just how many turns you'd like to do. When you get towards the end and your fingertips start complaining, then you can use that secondary pair of pliers to just chase that wire all the way around. It's not a difficult thing to do. What I tend to do is forget that there's a camera, and then I need to just flip the pliers over to the other side so you can actually see what's happening. So I'm going to just very gently give that a quick spin around so that everything is nice and neat and tidy. And I'm going to very gently now just compress that up so that it sits as neatly as possible. So there's always going to be one side where it is slightly more visible, the cut end. So this is going to be the front for me. So I'm going to pop my pliers just underneath like so and press the wire out to one side. And you'll notice that there's a small gap beneath that coil before we make the right angle bend. You will then be able to thread this onto a chain, or we can use the rest of those gorgeous beads to make a beaded necklace to go with our sunshine pendant. You can also obviously adapt which bead you use for the centre of the sun. So let's switch now to those flat pliers. So I'm going to use the area that I've marked across near the box joint, but not too near the box joint. And the first thing I'm going to do is grip this up at the top, which is a funny way to hold it, but it's the best way to show you. And I'm going to grip across the wire at the point that the black line I have made is visible to me. I'm going to push the wire all the way up and away, So what I might do is just run my thumb and forefingers over that and coil it round very, very gently so that it doesn't impact all of the things that are on my workbench. So far we have got our wrapped loop as a bail up at the top. We've got this beautiful extra long drop beneath that bail. We've got a tiny gap, and then we've got a right angle and then another right angle bend. So if I again use that black line to help me, I'm going to put this into the pliers at the point that I want that black line to line up and just push that all the way over, and then I'm going to make another angle change. So at the moment we've got a little bit of an upright coming away from the straight line, and then we've got a change in direction. It's quite a soft angle at this stage. Pop those pliers back in at the black line and bring that sharply all the way back down. So you can see we have got this funny little, it's almost like the half of a house. If you were a child and you were drawing a house, we've done the first half of a house. That is going to change. So let's grab hold again with the black line in position, and this is allowing us to make all of those lines the same size. So if I push this all the way back down now so that it comes down, it still looks like a house. Well, we don't want it to look like a house in a moment, but what we're going to do is pop those pliers back in at the mark, push the wire away like so, and make sure that that's a nice flat line. So it looks all a bit jaunty. We don't want it to look jaunty, we want it to look like a sun ray. So what we're going to do, now we've got the distances in place, is we're going to very, very gently modify each of those angles until we get the effect of a diamond coming away from that flat line. And it might just take a couple of moments, just give that a bit of a squeeze to help it sit in position. Now you can see that there's a difference in the angles on the left to on the right. I'd really like those to be the same angles. So I'm just going to play around with that for a second until it looks lovely. That's starting to look a little bit more like the diamond that I'm after. Now to begin with, I'm going to keep this line, the base line, as I'm going to refer to it, coming away straight from that wrapped loop that we created. So if I just pop this down on the board, this is what we're looking to create, but we're looking to create this a good 10 times. So why don't I make another one with you, and then I'll create a bunch off screen and you can join me back in a second. So I'm going to use that same line on my pliers to demark the distance between the base of that little diamond shape and the next little diamond shape. So we'll push the wire up and away to begin with, like so. And then we're going to pop those pliers in again, push the wire over, and if the angles don't line up right now, don't worry, because we can modify all of these angles. What we're trying to do with the repeated use of either pliers that are flat and the same distance all the way along, or using the line on our pliers, is we're trying to get the same size sun ray. So let's pop those pliers back in, bring the wire all the way back down, just making sure that everything stays as flat as possible. Pop those pliers back in at the line, bring it back down, and again, and then push it onwards. So you've got 4 sides on that diamond. And again, you can switch to your favourite pliers to help you modify very, very gently and slowly until you get that little diamond shape. And we're going to bring that wire at the baseline away again. So if we continue all the way along, and what we need to do is give ourselves a good 2 inches of wire at the far end. So you can make or as many as or as few of these little petals or sun rays as you like, but we're looking to create enough space so that we can hang a bead in the centre. So I've managed to create 9 little diamond shapes on that baseline of wire coming away from the wrapped loop, and that was using my 15 to 16 inches of wire. Now this set of pliers that I'm using here is much larger than the one I used to create the demonstration piece over here. So what we're going to end up with is an odd number of diamonds and some spare wire, at least 2 inches of spare wire on the end, and that will work really, really well. I'm now going to switch to my favourite pliers, and what we're going to do is add a little bit of shaping to that baseline. So very, very delicately, I'm just going to turn the pliers to create a curvature in each of those straight line sections between each of those little diamond forms. So what you will see is the difference created by different sizes of pliers. We're still going to end up with a useful size of sun pendant. It's just that one is going to look slightly different to the other. So I'm going to just very gently continue to curve between each of those diamonds, and if you find that you've run out of diamonds, let me show you what I mean before you get back up to the top. Don't worry, because we can add some more curvature to those little curved sections between those diamond sun rays. So that's what I'm talking about. If you think, well, gosh, I actually don't have space on my wire to create another diamond, that's absolutely fine, because we can just put some more curvature into those spaces between the sun rays. So just going to very, very cautiously and gently pull that a little bit more of an angle between each one, and if you take one too far, you can very, very gently undo it. As ever, we warmed our wire before we came to play with it today, so let's just add a little bit more of a warmth, a little bit more of a curvature. So you'll find that with small movements you can get that to fit, and I've even taken that a little bit too far. That's easy to fix. The next thing I want to do is to reflect the distance here on this side as well. Now, because we used the line on our pliers to do that, we can do that exact same thing, pop those pliers in and then put a gentle upturn on the wire, because that is going to wrap around the tiny little gap that we left underneath the coil of those little bits of wire up at the top there. So if I hold across where we made that bend like so, I'm then going to push the wire all the way around so that it snuggles like a little hook, like a little loop, all the way around that upright section. And the next thing I'm going to do is honestly not difficult. I'm just going to lift that tail of wire up and bring that down across the front of the pendant, and in that way you've tied that shape. You may wish to add a little bit of curvature to that last little bit, and then you can play with that very, very gently so that it sits exactly how you want it to. The next thing we're going to do is grab some round pliers or your bail makers and create a nice open centered coil to sit up at the top of your pendant. I'll tell you now, whilst I'm just rotating this coil around, why I go for an odd number of those sun rays in total, because it allows us to have a singular point down at the base opposite to the bail up at the top. If you've got an even number, it will still look beautiful. I just happen to prefer an odd number of those rays coming out of the design. So let's spin that around, spin that around, spin that around, and then we're going to push that down. So if you hold firmly and just push that down, it will sit neatly into position. So if you found that you had more wire than you needed, or you have an offcut from your scrap pot like I do, I've just got one just here, I'm going to make a very, very simple hanger for my bead of choice. So the first thing that I will do is use my flush cutters just to trim away that one end, making sure it's nice and neat and tidy. I'm going to create a larger loop on one end, so rotate that all the way around. Then you can grab your favourite fine tipped pliers and just draw that over. The next thing we're going to do is add on our choice of beads. So if I grab the rest of the Goddess Hemera mix, I love the sound of beads, then you can have your choice. I actually really happen to like these bead covers, bead caps rather, with this coated globe. I think it's very sunshiny. So let's add one onto the other side, and then we're going to add on another loop up at the top. You, of course, could use a head pin if you preferred. If you have one in your stash in a coloured wire that matches, all the better. And then we're going to make quite a large loop on this end as well. If you prefer, you can make a smaller loop for the section that hangs down underneath, so it's less visible. I actually quite like to see the loop. So I'm now going to just trim away that last little bit of excess wire, pop that in the pot, straighten the loops on both sides, and this is like a very, very basic way that you could rosary link wire beads if you wanted to. So let's open up the loop on one side and then just slide that into that open centered coil like so. And then all you need to do to finish off your Goddess Hemera pendant is just to close that up. Give that a bit of a push together so that it's nice and neat and tidy. And there you have your JJB Goddess Collection, Goddess Hemera Sunshine Pendant.